Yo, what up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Urban Absurdity. I'm your host, OG Ron. Shan has had some technical difficulties today, and we got a special guest in the building.
She called off work?
Yeah. Yeah, she called off. And she gonna be mad when she see this, because she was like, please intro that brother. So let me take it back. Y'all have seen him on Def Comedy Jam. Y'all have seen him on Comic View. You seen him in Chirac. You seen him on Showtime at the Apollo. The legendary comedian and radio host. Damn, I forgot about that. 5 syndicated radio shows. We got to talk about that.
All right.
George Willborn is in the building.
Thank you.
We got a little crowd music.
Thank you so much. Sit down, ma'am. Ma'am, sit down. What's up, homie?
What's going on, brother?
Man, Chi-Town, always good to see you, brother. Always, bird. Always good to see you. Glad to be here.
I gotta tell these people, bro. We've been doing the podcast less than a month here in Atlanta, and it's been such a long ride here, and just such a trying time, like as far as like not having anybody just that DM from you.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what, this is a step in the right direction. I feel good. I feel wanted. I feel loved.
No doubt, brother. You already know.
It's been a lonely ride, George.
Look, Atlanta, man, ATL ain't no joke, all right? It's one of the parts of the country that you really do, you feel your blackness. You feel, that the brotherhood and the sisterhood that you long for in other places of the country. But you also, you need some, like my man over in the corner, my boy said, you need some hookups. You need some people that that'll do something for you here. Look out for you. Mm-hmm. And so I said, let me reach out to you, because when I found out you was here, I didn't know you moved here. I didn't know you was here and moved the podcast and everything.
I was homeless for a little while, man. I had a home, but I had less money. So I had you know what I mean? Couldn't really do the podcast yet. But once I got it going, man, everything's been going cool now.
Atlanta's going to be great for you, man. ATL is going to be fantastic for you. The people here, they come out and they show out for you, So, we grind like from the south side of Chicago. You can bring that grind, and they're gonna appreciate you, believe me.
Well, I definitely brought it here, man. Now I got to get into your story, because I knew that you were in Atlanta, because I was seeing like you making posts and stuff, because I follow you on my Facebook page too. What made you choose Atlanta to move to?
Well, I really work opportunity. So I came here doing radio. I was in New York, and in fact, when I left Chicago, man, that was like 13 years ago. I went to New York, then I took a job in D.C., went back to New York, but I went to Brooklyn. So then I got an offer to do another syndicated radio show. I think this is like my 4th or 5th syndicated show coming here to Atlanta with Rick Party and Sasha the Diva. Okay. And so I was like, cool. I knew Rick from Chicago, and I had heard about Sasha, and she was great on radio. I said, sounds good. So I picked up my family, moved from Brooklyn, and took a job here at OG 97. Okay. All right. And then 2 months later, the pandemic hit. And so everything in the world changed, and everyone had to pivot no matter what we were doing. Everybody went out of the station, went back home and everything. But radio is what got me back down here specifically. It wasn't like me. It really wasn't on my bingo card. Atlanta wasn't on my bingo card until the opportunity for radio came in. Okay. Now, we're going to get into your legendary comedy career, how you got into that. But how did radio first start? That's a good way to get in. How did radio first start? Like, most people I've talked to, they say they ran into somebody, say, hey, you got the voice for it, or hey, I think you would be good here, like just come try it out. How did it work for you? So I was hosting All Jokes Aside in Chicago. It was like the 3rd black-owned comedy club in the country at the time. That's where all the kings, all the queens, the top comedians in the country came through that club over a 7-year period. So I was about the 2nd year doing it, maybe my 1st or 2nd year doing the club. I was doing comedy, and I did a show for, I think, Diane Reeves or somebody like that. Okay. And it was sponsored by V103 radio station in Chicago. And so I did the show, and one of the salespeople, I think his name was Curtis Cooper, was there. And he went back and told his boss about how great I did opening up for Diane Reeves.
Okay.
And so Max Myrick, he was the programming director at the time. He came and he brought the whole sales team down to All Jokes Aside. Now, unbeknownst to me, I didn't know it. To watch my performance.
Yeah.
So I killed it that night they was there, and Max came back the following night, and he watched my show again. And then I went to the bathroom, and he was in the hallway. And he said, hey, man, what do you think about doing morning radio?
Damn.
And I said, well, long as it doesn't interfere with my television, my comedy and television and film, desires, then I don't have a problem doing it.
Yeah.
And so he offered me a job, and and I started coming in doing mornings with John Mons and Bonnie DeShawn. And I moved into the building.
I remember that name, Bonnie DeShawn.
Yeah, she's a Chicago legend, you know. And I moved into River City. That's where the radio station broadcast out of this. It looks like a Jetson building in Chicago, a futuristic building. So I moved into that building of the radio station so that I wouldn't be late to work. I was still late.
They just come knock on your door.
Exactly. It only happened a couple times, but I wanted, I didn't mind doing it, but I never sent no demos in. I never, once again, radio really wasn't something I had sought out after, but I was just really extremely good at it because I didn't come with any personas or, what you see and what you hear is what you get. My comedy and radio is they're parallel in that respect. I don't have a lot of gimmicks. I don't have a lot of personas. It's just who I am, and that seemed to work.
So would you say, like, since you've been doing, because now you've been doing radio like what, 30 years or more than that?
Yes, over 30. Yeah.
So how would you compare doing radio to comedy? Like, is it like, do you like one better? Like, comedy was your first love, obviously.
Comedy is definitely my first love, but. Like I said, I get to bring comedy to radio like I bring comedy to the stage.
Okay.
With the exception of the FCC.
I got you.
And I done had a couple of MFs and all this, some F-bombs, over my career. But the thing about it is just it being free enough to be creative and say how I feel about this or what I think about it, is what I've always done. So I don't know that one is better than the other. I like one better than the other because I've had a lot of freedom with both. Yeah. But stand up in its own right, man, is just that's a whole nother being in that craft. Comedy it's so broad, so many different ways of comedy, but stand up comedy, that's different than the internet. That's different than doing skits. It's different than impressions. That's even if impressions are part of stand up, but just standing up there, coming with your jokes and your materials, and sometimes not, just coming off the dome, is nothing like that. But, I try to bring that to radio as well, though. Okay.
Now, one thing I didn't know, because for the Urban Absurdity Watchers, we interviewed you, I think it was like back in 2021. It was a while ago, 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And one thing I didn't know is that it was between you and Bernie Mac, the host. All jokes aside, is that true or a rumor?
No, that's true. That's true. But when Raymond, the owners of All Jokes Aside, Raymond Lambert, Mary Lindsay, and James Alexander, they had a program and a mindset of a strategy of what they wanted to do in regards to that comedy club. And Bernie and I was very close. I mean, that was like, that was my brother. So it was never a competition between he and I. In fact, different competitions. He got out of a competition before, I called him the competition I won for the Crown Royal comedy competition. I called him. I said, hey, man, it's a competition coming. He had already won Miller Lite. He said, yeah, Holmes, I know. I signed up. I said, I just signed up. He said, well, I'm going to get out. I said, no, man, you ain't going to get out, man. Let's go back together. So it was never a competition. But, yeah, they had just, came and wanted to either him or myself. And whatever whatever their reasoning was, I don't really know what it was, but they decided to go with me. But Bernie was gone anyway. I mean, after that, I think Bernie was already headed to Hollywood anyway. So his ship had already basically had sailed.
That was going to be one of my questions to ask you when I got to say something about it again, because I think that's rare. I don't think as many human beings on this earth that would win the Miller Lite comedy competition. Then you guys talk and say, okay, the Crown Royal comedy competition is coming up. And they just say, you know what? I mean, especially off the high, you just won that one.
Yeah, he had
You
just
can get
won.
real greedy and say, I'm about to go 2 for 2.
Well, he had signed up already.
Yeah.
So you're right. I hadn't really thought about it like that. But he and I was really close. And that competition, I had missed out on the Miller Lite. I don't know how I did, but I had missed out on it. And so, excuse me, he called, and when I called him, I was like, here's another one. He was like, no, I'm not going to get in this one. I want you to win it.
Yeah.
And back then, you had to go to different places. So you had to go to Reds on the north side of Chicago, a club you had to go make the north side a crowd laugh. Then you had to go to Mr. Lee's Chateau on the west side of Chicago. And you make that crowd laugh. Each semifinal round, if you made it through, you would have to go to another side of the city for the next semifinal round. Well, Bernie went with me on each round. Every round that I went to, he was right there with me, as every step of the way. And the end of the competition at the finals, Kim Cole hosted it at the Regal Theater, and I was able to, I won that competition, and thank God and thank my family, thank Bernie. He was selfless like that,
When I was writing this down, I was like, I wonder would Bernie Mac have been mad if you'd have lost. Just because we feel like we know Bernie Mac.
He would have been mad. My Holmes ain't that a bitch? I didn't get out of the competition. You gonna lose? Yeah.
And one thing I was thinking about when you said that they kind of went to different sides of Chicago, because people aren't from Chicago don't realize like the South Side ain't like the West Side, and the West Side definitely ain't like the North Side and stuff like that.
Not at all.
So going through all of those crowds, like, did it make you guys stronger because you had to go through those different, like in one city, going through all of those different climates?
Absolutely, because it trains you to different type of audiences. Like you said, the South Side people are a totally different type of audience than the people on the West Side of Chicago. And in most cities, it's like that if it's segregated. I mean, when those segregated cities like Chicago. So yeah, man, it made us stronger. It's made you have to do some audiences. I used to come here to Atlanta and do Bruce Club here, man. Please, and they only used to have to do, I think it was 227 or 211. I forget the name of the club, but they'll tell you here in Atlanta, man, that club was so raw. They only had to do about 20 minutes if you could survive the 20. So clubs like on the West Side of Chicago, that honed that part of your craft. Yeah. So when you went to other parts of the country, like Atlanta, or you went to places like Detroit, some places in Detroit, that were really demanded, or like Peppermint Lounge. When I went and did Bill Bellamy's room, Peppermint Lounge in Orange, New Jersey, you had to come with it.
Okay.
You had to be raw, and they didn't want to hear all the little setup and all that. You're gonna have they want to hear.
They wouldn't even let you set the jokes up.
Man,
you just had to come out with the punchline.
You better come on with it. Please, and don't wear the wrong outfit.
Oh my God, that is hilarious. Now I got a question, because one of the things that I found out that we had in common was strong grandmothers in our life. Now my grandmother, due to the gang violence and stuff that was going on in Chicago, she got me out of there and took me to Kansas City. I saw you say that your grandmother just kind of kept you busy, put you in the choir, you in bowling, had you doing this and had you doing that.
Yeah.
So how did comedy pop up as something that you wanted to do? Because you had a ton of extracurricular activities that you could have fell into.
I did. Man, my grandmother, and she would have me doing frivolous stuff around the house too. Like grandmama would do, go get my teeth, rinse my teeth off, go close that door and open this door. Just having you doing frivolous stuff. But I was on the usher board. My mother, she founded the Thomas A. Dorsey Youth Choir. I used to go to Thomas A. Dorsey's his church on 33rd in Indiana.
Okay.
Pilgrim Baptist Church is where I was baptized. And my mother, she founded his youth choir, which consisted of me, some gangbangers from the South Side of Chicago, some disciples, some L. Rookins, my cousins. Yeah. And, that's why it started. And then it ended up being over 100-voice choir. So I was involved with the church. I would go to conventions. I was on the usher board. I was I played organized basketball. I was on the bowling league. Used to get right on King Drive, the Cottage Grove bus to King Drive, take King Drive all the way down to King Bowl. At 10 years old, 9 years old, I was on tap dance. I was all that, you know, trying to get me out of the grips of the mean streets of Chicago.
Yeah.
But none of that made sense. I ended up being a merchandise expediter for Sears World Trade. So I was I was working in Sears Tower, man, on the 50th floor, making a really good money and working for a company that was new, and it just wasn't satisfying. I just knew it was something. It wasn't for me. And then
it wasn't your call.
It wasn't my call, and either I was really good at it, I was making really good money, and the company I kept getting promoted, you know, but it just was a void there that, you know, that made me easily detract and be distracted from it. So when my sister moved to Memphis, and out of nowhere, I just ended up going to visit her. You know, I said, let me go pop up and visit my sister. And then before you know it, I was like, hey, man, I'm going to take the rest of my sick days. You know, then you know, a few days later, I'm going to take the 2 weeks vacation I got left. I'm going to go ahead and take a leave of absence. Then half a year later, you know, I'm like, okay, I'm not coming back. Send me my last check.
So, yeah, that's usually how it works, too. Yeah. So that brings me, speaking of Memphis, because we didn't get to this in the first interview. How did you get your comedy start in Memphis, being from Chicago? It says like Sir Laughs a Lot.
That's the first
87?
87. Sir Laughs a Lot is the comedy club that I went to. I had moved to Memphis at this point. I had quit my job. I had quit my job at Sears. Was broke. My sister was broke. I was waiting for my last check, and she was waiting on her income tax check. And our stepdad, I call him a stepdad, he was the guy that kind of took care of us, and we lived with him. He had stopped coming home because we didn't have no job, you know, so we eating up his groceries. He leave, we was on the couch. He come home, we on the couch. You know, so he started leaving, he stopped buying groceries, you know. He started eating out, and so just me and my sister. So my sister income tax check came.
Okay.
Her check came. Now we back in the saddle. So we went.
We back on top.
We back on top, man. So we got some haircuts, got some outfits, and across the street was a Kroger. We went and got a fifth of Cuervo Gold tequila.
Oh shit!
And behind the Kroger was a club called the Comedy Club Cafe in Memphis. We went and bought like 6 tickets because we had a couple friends there for the comedy club. I had never been to a comedy club. So that night we went to the comedy club. First time I went to the comedy club, Johnny Walker was the headliner. And this guy named Johnny Walker, and I was just amazed, and I was rude. Now thinking back, you know, I was loud, and I didn't mean to be, but I just ignorant, just didn't know no better.
What you was doing, heckling them?
I didn't mean to. I got a loud laugh too, so I might have just been laughing loud, you know. But it was just I didn't know how to act at a comedy club. So after the show, I really had a good time, and the guy was funny. I said, "Hey man, Johnny," I said, "I think you're a really funny dude, man." I said, I really enjoy myself, you know. I said, but I think I'm funnier than you.
Oh.
But like I said, I didn't know that was offensive.
That's that Chicago bravado too.
A little bit back then. It was very strong back then.
Yeah.
but luckily he didn't take offense to it, you know, Bird. He was like, you know what, if you feel like that, come on to the open mic tomorrow night, you know. And so we exchanged numbers. He was trying to hit on my sister anyway. So.
Oh shit!
So I'm like, cool. I called him the next day, man. I said, bro, I don't know nothing about doing comedy. I just know I love the feeling that I make, you know, when I make people laugh.
Yeah.
And so he said, I tell you what, I'm gonna come show you how to formulate your thoughts and what you did. So he came for 5 days in a row. And he came over my crib and he showed me how to write. He showed me how to take things that I had experienced in my childhood or whatever. And how to formulate those jokes, how to come in with a punchline. And that following week, I went to Sir Laughs a Lot. That's the club that was 87?
Yeah, it says.
Yeah, 87, yeah. 1987. So we went to the Sir Laughs a Lot, and all-white club, downtown Memphis, Tennessee.
Damn.
And I had like 7 or 8 friends, you know, that I had met, and my sister came. And we went and saw the owner, and I didn't tell him I'd never been on stage. Me and John, I told him I was a comedian from Chicago. Can I get 5 minutes?
Yeah.
And so he's like, sure. You know, so I get on stage, and I remember the first joke I ever wrote. And so it's all white people, and it's packed in there. And I get on stage, and surprisingly, I wasn't nervous at all. You know, and so I got on stage, and I said, Thank you. I said, my first joke. I said, man, I can't. My name's George Willborn, and I can't believe that I'm here. You know, I'm just recently moved here from Chicago, Illinois, and I cannot believe I'm living right here in Memphis, Tennessee, the home of the king. Man, give it up for the king. Now the white people shout, I said, give it up for the king. They say, yeah. I said, yeah, BB King. I love it. So they fell out, man. The crowd fell out, man. And then I did my 5 minutes about my mother shouting in church and stuff like that. That's all I knew about. You know, it was my first time on stage, and the people, they really enjoyed it. They clapped and everything. So that was on a Sunday night.
Okay.
All right, that Tuesday, the club owner called me because I exchanged numbers, and he said, hey, look, my host, because he also was a promoter.
Okay.
And he promoted comedy shows in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee, along with owning Sir Laughs a Lot. And so he said, hey, look, my host canceled on me. Would you do a show for me in Paragould, Arkansas on Wednesday with the following night for $150? Two shows. I said, absolutely. And so Johnny Walker was the headliner of that. So the guy who introduced me to comedy, 3 days later, I was on the road doing comedy with him, learning how to do it. So I was an amateur comedian for 3 days. 3 days.
Damn.
3 days after the first time I went on stage, I was on the road making money and learning how to do it. And then after that, I just started getting booked for Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee. I just went on the road and I did that for a year till I came back home to Chicago. And I came back home to Chicago after going to truck driving school, and I came back to Chicago, and me and Bernie met, and then boom, I was back on the Chicago scene.
Man, I love hearing stories like that, but I always think to myself, why in the fuck couldn't something like that ever happen to me? I always hear people say, man, I went and did this show. Next thing you know, somebody parted the fucking crowd. It was like, you.
You're the one we're looking for.
You the motherfucker I've been waiting on.
Yeah.
So one thing I didn't know, like, and I don't know if this is true, but you know, Wikipedia be saying all kind of crazy shit.
I set the ass straight. What
MTV, The Real World, you were on there?
I was. First season with my boy David Edwards. David was a good friend of mine. David Edwards is I think about 3 years he lived in Chicago, and we bonded. You know, he's like my little brother, and so he went out there and got the he was the first comedian on reality TV.
I was just about to say, that seems like that might have been the first damn reality TV show.
That was the first reality TV show, was The Real World. That kicked it off. That was the first one. And so David, he called me and said, hey, man, I want you to come on and do a couple of episodes with me and film on it. So I did. I came out to L.A. and just filmed with him and Tammy Rowan and been knowing them. And we walked down Melrose and got tattoos. I got tattoos, the same tattoo as David, you know, thinking that was going to get me on the show even more. They didn't get me shit but a tattoo, but never.
You got something out the deal.
No, it did. I got something out the deal. But yeah, I was on the first season of Real World as an extra to some degree, not a cast member, but a couple appearances.
So that was in '91. Did that lead to, like, how did Def Jam come into the picture? Like, how did you get discovered for Def Jam?
Well, Def Jam was a whole nother thing. Bob Sumner, you know, that's a funny story too. When Bob came to see 10 comedians. Bob Sumner, who was the scout for Russell Simmons back then, like Bob was the man, still a good guy, and but he was instrumental in picking, you know, going across the country, hand picking the comedians who would be considered to participate with Def Comedy Jam. Yeah. And so the first time they came to Chicago, they was coming to see Bernie. I think it was at Miltroneers or something like that. And somehow or another, I ended up, and this is back in the day, you know. What year was that, they said? Because I'm bad with
92.
Yeah. And so, you know, that's with the big-ass handheld camcorders, right? Similar to 34 pounds, right? Yeah. And so he had the big camcorder, and it was a list of 10 comedians that he was there to see if they was going to be on Def Jam. I was not on that list.
Uh-oh.
I don't know how I was not on the list. I don't even know how the list was compiled. I think, you know, I don't know. That's too many years ago for me to remember. All I know is I wasn't on the list. I don't know how I ended up with Bob, and I was the one ended up with Bob. I think maybe I got him from the airport or something. How or another, I ended up with Bob, and I came to the show with him. I said, look, man, when he got to it, I said, listen, it's going to be impossible for you to watch these guys and really get a feel of what type of comedy they are holding this big ass camera at the same time. I said, so I'm going to hold this. I'm going to hold the camera for you, and so that you can really pay attention to whoever it is that you watch. Because I've always been an OG comic in Chicago. I love them cats for real. And I've never been envious about anybody's rise, or things that they may have gotten above me, or none of that. So I held that fucking camera, for 10 comedians.
35-pound camera.
3750. Man, I got my arm muscle strong, and I steadied it, and my man was able to get those comedians and pick some of them, and I think the following season that I don't know. I think that might have had something to do. And then Bob was like, "How did you end up not being on the list?" I don't remember exactly how it all unfolded. Yeah, but I did end up going and doing it. Me and Bernie, we taped one day apart, so we went together, man. We went together. He taped on that Friday. I taped on that Saturday. We like, I ain't scared of you, motherfuckers. All I was right there in the room when he even came up with that. So the Def Jam stuff was it was meant to happen, but even that didn't really happen the normal way for me. I was kind of almost left out of that. But once I performed, my performance, anybody who stood out on Def Jam, they had a good chance of doing some work afterwards.
Okay, so, and since this is so close, because it says 92, you was on Def Comedy Jam and Comic View in the same year. So did Def Comedy Jam lead the Comic View, or like how did that?
So really, I was doing 3. Damn. Because I did Def Jam, I did Comic View, but I also was hosting, and I can't find it. Maybe somebody out there you can find it. I was hosting a comedy show called Raw and Naked Comedy. And it was on BET.
Raw and Naked Comedy?
Raw and Naked Comedy.
EKKID?
Raw and Naked Comedy. So it was a show centered around comedians that were blue comedians, like A.J. Johnson, Rodney Winfield, Ronaldo Ray, those type of comics that, was known to kind of be more of a blue or harsher tone in their comedy. It was a whole show around that, and strippers, exotic dancers. And so I was the host of this show on BET Action Pay-Per-View at the same time we did Comic View. So all of those kind of coincided together, but they didn't want me to do both. Wow. They didn't want me to do both. So I had already did a season of Comic View, and I had really ripped it up, and I became one of the favorites on there. So then when it came around to do these specials, I did a comedy. They did a grandstand special or something. Whoever did the best in that was supposed to be the next host. Yeah. And so I killed it, but I was also doing BET Action, the Raw and Naked Comedy. So the people from BET Comic View came and told me, look, you can't do this second season, or we're not going to allow you to be the host of BET Comic View. Damn. So I did all of those. I still did it, and of course they didn't let me be the host either. But I took both opportunities at the same time. But all of those things was coincided, right at the same time. BET Comic View and Def Jam and then the BET Comic View Action Pay-Per-View Raw and Naked. All of that was buzzing and hitting at the same time.
Okay, and then the next year, so you were on Showtime at the Apollo. So was that kind of like you came out just to do a set? Like how did that work? Were you hosting?
No, I didn't host it. I came. I was performing. I think if I'm not mistaken, I think Steve might have been the host. His first couple of years, Steve Harvey might have been the host. But that was the first time I did Showtime at the Apollo. And for most comedians, no matter what you've done, whatever your body of work is, especially old school comics, doing that particular room in Harlem, doing well at Showtime at the Apollo.
Yeah.
That's just something that you want to, you want to mark off your bucket list, if you will, as a stand-up comic.
Yeah, because
so
it had that damn reputation of like you can get booed off the stage.
Oh no, bro, no. And I got a standing ovation there. And so for me, that was just like that's just really huge for comedians. Because that's one of them rooms we was talking about. They don't give a damn. They like, you need to be funny right away.
Yeah.
Immediately, we might give you a joke and a half. Don't miss 2 jokes in a row.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed doing Apollo just from the creative standpoint and kind of what that marks and what that says about you as an artist, as a stand-up comedian. That was a cool moment for me.
What do you think about, or what do you think it is about Chicago that they produce so many fucking comedians? It's like, and I didn't really start thinking about comedy like that until maybe a few years back, but you got a lot of Atlanta comedians, you got a lot of New York comedians.
Yeah.
But Chicago, it just seems like,
I
got a whole list of people here.
Yeah.
Like from Bernie Mac, Dion Cole, Lil Real, Craig Robinson, Robin Harris, Godfrey, D-Ray, Corey Holcomb, Adele Gibbons, Hannibal Buress, Michael Collier. It's just like, and those ain't even all of them. I ran out of paper.
And the list goes on. The list goes on and on, to be honest with you, and even the young group of Chicago comedians, the Mojo Brooks and Just Niches, and these comedians have been honed. Chicago and the history of comedy, some of those names that you named, Bernie and Adele and Cheryl Underwood, Evan Lonnie Lionel and myself included, we were very close knit as as artists in Chicago, and then we had a platform. When All Jokes Aside came, we had a platform. And that's something that's key. So we had a foundation, then we had a hierarchy in place where some really incredible people to follow who had already started doing it and being successful at it. And then you had a city that, bred all of this wonderful material for you. If you could survive, then if you could survive it, then you've got all of these rich experiences that you can share. So I think Chicago itself, the city, had a lot to do with it. I think the audience and their astuteness in comedy and knowing what funny is and demanding that on a high level. And then the hierarchy that was in place in regards to stand-up comedians. There's always been a very high mark set. And those comedians want to meet that. When I met Bernie and I was doing comedians didn't come up. He was hosting Bernie. I think that's probably one of the reasons why we got so close. Because when me and him met, he was hosting open mic at the Cotton Club on Michigan.
Okay.
And that's where everybody was coming. Singers, dancers, poets. R. Kelly and his first group, MGM, was singing down there. You had poets. You had all kind of people would come and do open mic on Mondays. So I come down, and when I came back and moved to Chicago, I had to find out where they're doing comedy. They told me, go up to the Cotton Club. So I go there, and when you walk in, the Cotton Club, so you walk through the door, the stage is right above the door. So as soon as you walk in, you got to walk past whoever's on stage. So people had to walk past Bernie Mac as they walked into the club. And he was just picking their ass off, like fish in a barrel. So I come in, and I'm like,
like roasting them when they walk past?
As soon as you walk through the door, because as soon as you walk through the door, the stage is right there. The door is right here, and you walk through the door, the stage is right here. And so you walked in, and look at this motherfucker right here. And as soon as you walk through the door, look at the teeth on this motherfucker right here. He opened the door with his teeth. So he was tearing motherfuckers up. I come in, I'm like, bro, I'm looking at the list. I say, bro, when do the comedians come on? He said, Holmes, the comedians don't go on. I said, why not? He said, well, they don't want to follow me. I said, well, nigga, I follow you. Put my name on the list. And so, he put me on the list, and a couple more people went up, and I went up, and obviously I had to work hard because this Negro was tremendously talented and raw talent back then, and I went back on, and before you know it, other comedians just started signing up, and coming, and everybody started doing. All the comedians started coming, but that's how Bernie and I got close, because I guess I was willing to, say I don't give a shit, I don't give a fuck about none of that.
Yeah.
I wanted to hone my craft as well, even though he was destroying that room even back then, open mics. So yeah, it's a different type of different type of environment when it comes to Chicago, and I think Chicago itself and the comedians that came in and came before each other, that built a desire for comedians to really, really do well, and really try to find their own place. And they've done a good job of that. I mean, can't nobody touch Chicago comedians. I'm trying to do a show, Chicago against anybody. I put Chicago comedians against any city, and that's no disrespect. I know I'm in Atlanta, ATL, no, but I'm just telling you.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, any city. Y'all come on, bring it.
Man, take me back to the Cotton Club, and all jokes aside, like, now you got comedy clubs and it's just like filled every weekend. There's no telling who's going to be there, where they from. You got different comedians coming.
Right.
Did it work like that there, or was it just all Chicago comedians every weekend?
No, not for the open mics, it was just local comedians. Nobody was driving in. But no, because then people would come in from Detroit and stuff like that. Once All Jokes Aside came, there were other clubs like the Comedy Click, and there was, like I said, Milt Trenier's. Bernie opened up a club over a little bit on the north side, didn't open up a club, but they ran a night, over there. My boy Mr. Dose and Evan Lonnie Lionel, they had a club on the north side. There was a club called Spices. So there was all these different clubs that ended up popping up. Heroes, which was a club right down the street that was a nightclub, but they had a comedy room in the back of the nightclub. So all of these different places started popping up, and it gave comedians more opportunities and more places to hone their craft, in Chicago.
Okay. I saw you on a podcast, and I hate that I didn't write it down, so I give them their credit for having you on there. But y'all were talking about Harlem Nights and the way that they had all of these big name comedians making a movie.
Yeah.
A classic movie at that.
Yeah.
Why don't you think that has been done again? Like, not just like, because now that I think about it, it could be done with just Chicago comedians.
No,
but like
could.
On an overall scale, like, why hasn't that been replicated?
Man, Bird, I have had this conversation with Chris Tucker. I've had this conversation with Mike Epps. I've had it with Monique. I've had this conversation with a lot of my friends. DL, I've had this conversation over the years. I don't know exactly why, because in my opinion, there are enough of us who are in power and have the resources to have made that happen by now. Yeah. Even if it was an independent film, even if it was something that you made and it was done, and then it was said, okay, this was done good enough that we'll put a big budget behind it. Yeah. So I don't know. Had I been, and when God willing, in a position to do that or to help facilitate that, I think we're getting closer to it because more and more talk about it over the years. There's more and more people talking about, where's our Harlem Nights? But I've been crying that for a long time. Hell, now I don't even know if these niggas will include me, so I'm going to there's so many people now that's funny and considered, at the top of the food chain, that hopefully I would be able to walk past and be like, tea, sir. Got your tea. But I think it should be done. I think it can be done. I think the comedians, I mean, obviously they're just an abundant. There'll be comics, I say it jokingly, but there'll be comics left out of a project like that needs and would deserve to be in it. Yeah. But it's certainly, by now it could have and should have been done.
Yeah, because when I think about Harlem Nights, like, you sit and you think like Red Fox and Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, and people like that, to have a movie just like, because they're not here no more, Red and And God damn it, who did I just say?
Richard Pryor.
Richard Pryor. Red and Richard Pryor are here, and just to be legendary comedians and have them on screen, and just like, and the movie was hilarious. It was just like they were older comics, but when like I was a kid, I was young watching that movie,
Sure,
and they were hilarious. Even if you didn't know exactly the extent to like who they were, it was just like something that will live forever.
And it will. It definitely will, and it inspired a whole nother generation of stand-up comedians. And as you said that, I started thinking about some of the relationships, you know, that those comedians had with each other and the ones that we saw them have. You know, Richard, I believe, really had a great deal of respect for Eddie, and Eddie had a great deal of respect for Red, and those entities and those comic genius minds, they cared about each other. I believe it seemed like they cared and had a level of respect that I don't know is prevalent in today's group of legendary comedians. I don't know how close we are. Now, back in the day, we used to be super close.
Yeah,
comics used to be super close, and I mean all of them. I mean, I said Steve. I know them all, and I was close to them all. I remember a time we were just, you know, and Def Jam was like a party. That wasn't a competition of the New York comics against Chicago. That was just a whole collaboration of great comics all around, sharing each other's craft and talent, and really appreciating that, you know. And somewhere down the line, or maybe the lust for fame and fortune perhaps diminished that a little bit to some degree, or maybe that in some ways stopped some of the camaraderie that, you know, was growing so fluently back in the day. Maybe that stifled it. And maybe that's some of the reason that's not as quick for people to do things together with each other. But I don't see why they wouldn't, you know, put a few dollars together, and you know, and we all have the talent to write, and we know cameramen, we got excellent writers all around us that we, you know, know, and that we, you know, we are ourselves. So hopefully it will get done, and hopefully I'll be a part of it.
Now I have a question about the current state of comedy, because you've seen it all. You've seen the legendary comedians, came up with them, been on the road, like been killing stages for over 30 years now. Do you think comedy is like oversaturated with comedians now? Because I wasn't a comedy connoisseur back in the day because I was a kid, so I really didn't know, but it doesn't seem like there was that many comedians as it is now.
And there's not. I think you all are getting confused with what comedians are.
Okay.
And I think you all are starting to identify other aspects of comedy with comedians and stand-up comedy. And like I said earlier, stand-up comedy stands on its own, no pun intended. It is a whole nother skill set that requires time. Yeah. You know, it doesn't require clicks. It doesn't require a creative skit. It doesn't require going viral. It requires years and years of honing a certain craft and seeing certain crowds and different shit happening on stage, and you reacting to it. And the next time that happened, you being more prepared for this time, because that time in Cleveland, you know, 3 years ago, this happened. And there's a process with stand-up comedians, and I believe that's gotten lost in some of the other facets of comedy, because there's, you know, you got the internet, you know, that wasn't even here 30 years ago, 20 years ago, you know, in any capacity like it is now. Exactly. You have the internet superstars and influencers, you know, that you're calling comedians. Well, is that a comedian? You know, I don't think so. Not from where I come from, and not from, you know. So I think that there are, but are there a lot more people want to do it? Absolutely. Yeah. Because they're more, look at the avenues. Look at how many different places they can go. Before, you had to get your ass up in an open mic. You had to go find somewhere to get on stage. Yeah. Now you can do it on your phone and send it in. And oh shit, he hilarious. Your foot ain't never stepped on a wooden stage. You know, so I just think that for our society, as it evolves and as we turn, as we continue to have all of these facets evolve, that some things stay, and should stay the same. A stand-up comedian stands on its own, and everybody is not a comedian that you see making you funny, or making you laugh, or you see it going viral. Even they'll be the first one to tell you. Go up there and ask them to do 30 minutes without a skit, without some rope, and without hanging around dangling, and see how funny they are.
Yeah. Because I used to hear comedians say you had to put in 10,000 hours. And now you got, like, if you got 1 million followers, you can just, like, you become a professional comedian the first night because they're going to sell them tickets. So the open mic is just like.
And the clubs are going to treat you as such. Because if you're selling it and the fan base is coming out, they care about asses and seats.
Yeah.
So they don't care about my 30 plus years. They don't care about none of that. They care, man, he's hilarious. They don't care if you're funny. Now the audience cares. But they looking at you on the phone, and then they're expecting you when you get on stage to do the same thing that you saw them do on the phone. And then all of them cannot do that. Some do it very, very well, and I have a lot of respect for those who do.
How do you feel about crowd work? And I asked a lot of comedians that, and the damn answers, like, the spectrum is just like, you never know.
You know why?
What the answer will be.
Because once again, people keep coming up with something that is they think is new, and they come up with a new word for it.
Okay.
I've been doing quote unquote crowd work my entire career. And I call it working without a net. It's like a tightrope. It's like you are not planning anything. You're going up there knowing that the energy and whatever it is that come off, like a freestyle rapper, if you will. Okay. You have no idea what you're going to do, but you just know that you go up there and have some fun. That's been for the as long as comedy been around. Now I think there is a fixation on it once again because of social media and because of the vast amount of people who now do just that, and they find that that's the new thing. Talk about people on stage, where you from, all blah blah blah. But that's not new. And I'm gonna tell you something. It's not easy to do. Everybody cannot do that. It's another skill set as far as I'm concerned that has to be honed when it comes up to stand-up comedy. It's difficult enough to go up and do a prepared bit. Yeah. And hit and really do what you want. To go up there and be like, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit what I'm about to say. And I tell my audience, I don't know what I'm gonna say. Sometimes I don't know what I'm gonna say. I hear the jokes when you hear the jokes. Okay, I hear them when you hear them. So for me though, it's so great though. I tell you why, Bird, because it's nothing funnier than when you do something right on the off the cuff. Yeah. The audience know you ain't done that joke in front of nobody else. Everybody know, oh, this happened in real time. That's why it's so funny, and that's why it's so gratifying as the teller of the joke, is because he's like, wow, that shit was hilarious, and I didn't know I was gonna say it. I'm gonna say it again on the next show, but for this audience and that crowd work sometimes generates the most organic type of laughter that you can get. And I think that's why it's a big deal too, because it's entertaining to watch, and it's entertaining to do, and it's entertaining to be a part of, to be honest with you.
All right, now I got to pick your brain about radio, because one of the things that I've been wanting to get into, one of the things that I want to get into when I moved to Atlanta was a morning show. Now I've been in 4 years, and it's still hard to get one person that say they want to wake up every goddamn morning at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock and do a show every goddamn morning. It's just hard to do. Like, without the budget, I would say. Out of those 5 syndicated shows, were they all like morning shows, or how was that?
So I did. I was syndicated with Michael Baisden for 2 different stints. Those were afternoon shows. I was syndicated with Doug Banks and Dee Dee McGuire. That was an afternoon show. Oh, okay. I was syndicated here in Atlanta. That was a morning show. I did. I did mornings. I used to do mornings at WHUR, and then fly home and do afternoons in Chicago. at Willborn. I did that for 2 years, kind of like Tom Joyner.
I was about to say, I used to hear about the fly jog every damn day on the radio.
Yeah, but you never knew that George Willborn did that. Yes, I was the first comic jock, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah, and I did that for 2 years, flying back and forth. So it was a mixture of afternoon and mornings for me. But I love either one. I don't care. I've never been one that had a problem getting up. I've never been a problem. And once I'm up, I'm up. I don't drag up, and I'm up. And
so how early was that morning show?
Oh, the morning show, we had to be there. We had to be there at 5 because we was on at 6, so we had to be there an hour early to do the prep. And so I would get up, 3:30. 3:30, you're up and you're getting ready for work, and hitting the road, and depending on what city you are, how long it takes to get there, while y'all slobbing on your pillow, I'm up there and getting ready to make people laugh. But back then, radio was so huge. Morning radio was so huge, and people really enjoyed getting up to it. When in the mornings, everybody not a morning person.
Right.
Some people, they really need help in the morning. So that's why I enjoy doing morning radio, because I'm a fool right off the bat. I like having fun and getting to it early, and then that's a big deal for morning radio. You drive, and that's the last thing you want. But now you got so many avenues, you got so many choices. You got all the stuff that you listen to. You got XM radio, you got all that. So now you really have to have a really good product, I think, in order to make some waves in morning radio. I hope to still get it. I'm not on there right now, but I hope to, if it makes sense to. I'm talking to some people right now actually about something that might get me back on the air. And
see, one of the things I like about morning radio is just like when you're getting up early in the morning. Well, I know, like speaking for me, when I get up in the morning and I'm about to get in the car, I'm getting dressed. I'm not a music at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning type of person. You want to hear people talking about what's going on and stuff like that. Yeah. People actually, like in my opinion, I think they gravitate towards you more because you say a lot of relatable shit in the morning on the way to work and talking about that job and stuff like that. You got them, I think.
Yeah, no. People need to have something identifiable. There's no doubt about that. And I think that you're right. A lot of people want to have conversations and listen to the music. Some of that shit you don't want to hear first thing in the morning.
You know what, you're right.
I mean, just think about it. Some of this, first thing in the morning, something about, coochie on my eye. I don't, something about coochie on your eye. At 7:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
I don't want coochie on my eye at 7:30 in the morning. I don't know about you. I don't know about you. A lot of people do. I'm a coochie on the eye at 7:30 in the evening. 8 or 9 o'clock. A little bit later in the day. So that's why I think a lot of people want to laugh. And people want to laugh, man. A lot of times they go on to jobs, man, that they really they go into, but they may not be the greatest, atmosphere. So you laughing on your way to work. Sometimes you can deal with that ignorant ass person when you get there. Like, man, I've been laughing for the last 40 minutes before we even got here.
Exactly.
So I'm already prepared and ready for you. So morning radio allows you to, I think, to really have a bigger impact on a lot of people's lives that you may not realize.
Okay.
That's being lost, to be honest with you. I think it's radio is tough. It's tough business right now.
Okay, so outside of the FCC rules, no cursing and not no vulgar language and stuff like that, what are the downsides of radio? Do you have a certain format? Like, can you talk about what you want to talk about? Do they pick the topics? Because I know the program directors, as far as music, they got a playlist.
Yeah, that's going to vary from show to show. You know what I mean? I've been luckily be a part of some really, really incredible shows. Michael Basin had, obviously had a bunch of topics, and we dealt with a lot of community stuff. We dealt with a lot of things in regards to what's happening racially and politically. We dealt with a lot of that. And then Doug Banks, he liked to just, he liked to have fun, and talk about topical stuff. When I was with Frank Ski, Frank likes, he's very analytical and he lives abroad. I mean, he travels abroad, so he wanted to talk about different stuff, from different countries and different experiences. So it depends on the show in regards to the content, and what they're going to talk about. For me, it's always been. I guess why I've worked so many years in radio is that it never mattered. You know, like you can give me the prep and say, okay, George, we're gonna talk about this. We're gonna talk about this, and I'll look at it. Okay, cool. I'm gonna come up with some stuff. Or Michael Bays and be like, okay, don't tell him nothing. Don't show him nothing. Don't. Let's just go and get my immediate response and whatever comes off the top of my head. So I've always been able to do both. So it doesn't matter to me whether it's something that's scripted or something that it's a programmer who wants to be all local. If they want to do entertainment, if they want to do sports, I don't give a shit. I'm gonna make fun about it and have fun about all of it.
And I was just about to say, I do know that about you. Like, you don't really give a shit. So how did you survive in radio so long? Because now it just seems like you can get canceled just by the most minor shit. Like, now even if you don't...
That's amazing, because I have said some shit on the air. In fact, I said shit on the air one time when I first started, and I was working for... Barry Mayo, he's a actual god in radio. This dude is just... been so impactful, and he gave me my first hire as well. But Barry Mayo came into the station. I first started working. I think been my first week, so I was still a little groggy. Okay, I was still a little groggy because I was coming in at 2:30 and had to be at work at 4:30. So. God damn. So I came in, I think one of the days, and I had said something, but I was funny though. It was always funny, but since it wasn't scripted, I would talk and it would come out. I said shit, something. I would say, and this shit, and then so everybody looked at me and everything like, oh shit. We kept on going. So 10 o'clock, Barry comes through the studio door, busts the door open. Poof. Who said shit on the radio this morning? I said I said shit on the radio this morning. I said, I didn't intend to. I said, but I said shit. He said, let me tell you something. He said, I want 2 of those a week out of you or you're fired.
God I did not expect it to go that way.
Yeah. So what he was saying was he wanted me to be myself. Even though I had said something that obviously was against the rules. Yeah. What I had said in the moment was so funny that, the blunder really wasn't, is a lot less, of a bad thing when the result was so good. And me being comfortable enough to say it, he didn't want to change that. I think is what he was telling me. I want you to be yourself. And obviously you can't be coming to say shit and all this kind of stuff on the air, but bring that same energy and bring that same level of you to radio. And I appreciate him for doing that. I only said shit about 7 more times.
So are you comfortable with cameras now? Because I'm really in the media. I've been studying it for like the past 5 or 6 years, and it seems like now a lot of radio stations are they're becoming podcasts as well.
They have to. All the audio is video, and so I don't even see cameras. When I'm looking at it, when I'm like this podcast, I haven't seen the camera that one time. I naturally don't care about a camera. I mean, who wants to look directly in the camera? And I think it's self-centered is what I think it is. I think a person who's an egomaniac just want to stare into the camera, want you to see me, and so it doesn't bother me.
Okay, so as far as Atlanta radio, because I don't know if you want to put this out there. If you don't, I'll just edit that out. Like you say, you're going to California. So are there more opportunities that you're going out there for, like as far as radio, acting?
For me, it does. There's some projects, and I am I'm working on that move. There's a couple other things that I have to have in place that my agents and my family are working on. But for me, it is because there's some things that have been going on and some in the works for some years. For me, everybody's got a different journey. Mine took a little bit longer, I believe. For several different reasons, all because of choices I made. But doing radio for 30 years, that took me away from being able to do some of the sitcoms. But I had a stable job. Me doing all jokes aside for the first 7 years, didn't allow me to travel, so I couldn't do some of the things that some of my counterparts were able to do. So I'm a late bloomer when it comes to television and film opportunities, and those are the things that I really aggressively, and especially since my name has come up in the room in several different different ways that I'm excited about.
Okay.
Over the years, I think it's more than my time to go out there and really pursue and try to go after some of the things that I haven't accomplished yet. That are exciting for me, and that's television, film, and the likes. And I still like radio. You know, I'll take radio. You can do radio anywhere, man. You know, I've done radio at home more years than I've done radio in the studio now. Because after that change, nobody was in the studio together. You know,
Damn,
just
I
at
didn't think
home,
about that.
just at home doing it. You know, I've been in my drawers many days, many days making y'all laugh. You ain't know. Just
Wow.
hanging to the left, making y'all laugh.
Now, I got a couple of questions before we get out of here. Because last time we interviewed, this was like I said, like 5 or 6 years ago, Cat Williams hadn't burned the fucking internet down with what he did as far as exposing certain comedy beefs. Now, you don't seem like the kind of guy that has any beefs with any comedians.
I got beef.
Oh, shit. I was just about to say, has there ever been like any times where like you and certain comedians didn't get along?
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about these podcasts. 'Cause you know I don't do a lot of them.
Okay.
All right, because this is a bunch of tricking. That's what you niggas is doing. All right? You get on here and you're doing all that tricking and you're dry snitching, telling on shit that you shouldn't be telling on. See, where I come from and get your goddamn head busted, you know, doing all that. But nevertheless, this is where we are. This is where we are now, you know. And I know where a lot of bodies are buried. All right? I know where a lot of bodies are buried. But am I willing to jeopardize all that just for some likes and for people to get to know me better? At first, no, but now, yes. Yes, I'm tired of taking the high road. All right, I don't know, but I have beef with people I know I can whoop. All right, all right. So I got beef with J. Anthony Brown because I can whoop Jay any day of the week. I got beef with George Wallace. I can whoop him in my sleep. Both of them are 87 years old, and I heard a lot of people don't know this. J. Anthony Brown and George Wallace secretly have been married for 13 years.
God damn it!
Yes, they are a same-sex couple. Both of them. Both of them. Now you want the dirt? You heard it here. All right. Everybody, a lot of people. I know I'm going to take a lot of flack, but yes, they are happily in a monogamous relationship. George Wallace and J. Anthony Brown. They talk about each other's mama and all of that all the time, but they really are really inseparable. And hey, I'm for it.
Man.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that answer. I got one more because I've seen people ask you this 3 or 4 times on these podcasts.
All right.
Because you've been around Hollywood and celebrities and shit for a long time.
I have.
How many Diddy party invites have you gotten and turned down?
Oh, well, that's fair. Not that many, but a couple. You know, because I lived in L.A. You know, for some years and lived in New York. Yeah, so a couple invites, never personally.
Yeah,
no personal invites. But I had buddies who would hang out and was going. But I never really had a desire. Even back then when I was a little bit wilder and younger and doing those type of things and was on the scene, and I've got I know plenty, real celebrity friends, who do all that, have all of that stuff. That's never really been my thing, you know what I mean? That's never really been my cup of tea. And I'm social as anyone, but yeah, I'm still grinding. Look, I still ain't even made it. I'm not the cat that want to be at the party in the mansion and looking around and I'm the one that's trying. I'm grinding, still trying to get what I'm trying to get. I'm not enamored and want to be there. Next thing you know, I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing because my eyes are open and I'm looking at what you have and wish I had it. No, I'm going to grind and keep doing what I need to do to get what I want to have, so I can throw my Willie party.
There you
about
go.
the Willborn party. Come on there. Everybody keep your damn clothes on.
Man.
Yeah, man.
I appreciate you for coming back on the show, man. I appreciate you for reaching out. And hopefully before you leave, I don't know when you're getting out of here, I got some things coming up, man. It's been a long time coming. Like, any time you need me, you just let me know because I came to Atlanta to take over. I did not come down here to play.
Well, I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna be here for some unforeseeable time anyway. But you have always, man. From the first time, you know, we hooked up. I just love your professionalism. I love your grind. But you're really genuine, man. You know, and in this business, man, you got to be careful who you sitting down with. This shit lives forever. You know, people have all these different type of ulterior motives, and everybody want to, you know, take over the world. But do it with the class that you've been doing it. That's why I have zero problems, and I just wish you the best because you do it with class. You do your research. You know, you don't have no gotcha moments. If somebody want to, you know, volunteer that, I'm sure you'll take it. But you know, to make an environment and keep an environment where it's comfortable, especially for comics like me or older cats or been in the business that's not really into the slimy shit. I don't care about that. I want people to live their own lives. You know, I got my own bones. You know, so that's another reason. Yeah. You don't want to be throwing shit and saying shit about people. That motherfucker, well, what you did or whatever. Not that not that I care about that, but it's just about character. So I appreciate you. You know, and it's absurd to think that you're not gonna take over the ATL. It's absurd to think that because they out here for you, bro. And I want y'all to make sure y'all pull up on my man.